All right, welcome back. Welcome back. I'm Michael Brooks.
And I am Matt Binder.
And joining us now is the inimitable film guy, Matthew Weiss. Let's have Matthew's song, please.
Matthew, the film guy, is choosing your streams. Cassavetes on Netflix and other such themes. Maybe you'll watch one and learn a few things. Please recommend me a movie to stream. Matthew, please recommend me a movie to stream. Matthew, film guy.
Oh, I gotta love it. How you doing, Matthew?
You have such a good
Hey
song.
guys, I'm doing great. Glad to be here. What's doing?
Oh, thanks for doing this.
You have such a good song, man.
And I thank you. Again, I owe that to Jason Pace and his amazing talents. A friend of mine who's a musician in Washington State. But yeah, it works for me.
I like that. I like your plugs of him get more and more specific with each show. Like first you would just say his name, which is great.
I'll give you his phone number next week.
Yeah. Now it's like he'll be performing at
And before you know it, he'll be doing a little bit of a Jimmy Reefer Cake like plug, like, and you would catch the album at
Oh, Jimmy Reefer Cake is great. Jimmy Reefer Cake is just he is very entrepreneurial in that way. So Matthew, I want to set the stage for our conversation here today by letting the audience in on our we had an IM exchange yesterday, and because we found out that we would be covering that today's show would be a hybrid show, and we thought, of course, we wanted to speak with Matthew, and so I reached out to you over IM and I said, hey, what do you think about coming on tomorrow? And I said, we can both, I think it would be kind of interesting because it is actually this weekend. It is the Academy Awards, I think, on Sunday. So it would be interesting to kind of get a different take on the awards. And then in keeping with you, And then in keeping with you, maybe you could give us a couple of things that didn't get recognized by the Academy that people really should be watching or whatever. And I thought that was like fair. That kind of worked with you. And you responded, really happy, would love to come on, but I would prefer to talk about how vapid and crass and commercialized award season has become, which I just thought was like the most film guy Matthew response imaginable. But that said, I mean, hold forth.
Well, you editorialized a little bit there. I didn't say it has become because I think it started that way. I mean, it's
right.
You know, we're basically talking about a awards ceremony for the entertainment industrial complex. You know, it's like we just get to watch it on TV. You know, I would rather, as much as you guys joke, discuss the art of the moving image than, you know, the self-congratulatory kind of propaganda of the Oscars. You know, to me, it's I think you can put it together. It's the Super Bowl of advertising for the movies, except for that the game is the ads and the ads is the game, and you know it's bread and circuses. I'm not immune to the idea of royalty and glamour, but something about it just doesn't appeal to me. I'd rather actually watch movies that are uplifting or life-changing affecting.
Are you saying, Matthew, that you also, along with the art of the moving image, you can't also enjoy the art of the brand advertising?
Not as much. I mean, I have watched plenty of them in the past, but it's just like I can't get too excited about, you know, these movies per se. I mean, I've only seen a few of what are considered the best movies.
Don't you care about brands, Matthew? What's your brand, Matthew? Don't you care about?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really that up on what my brand is. I think I've been crafting it sort of piecemeal here with you guys. But
it's actually a pretty distinct brand, buddy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, if anybody's out there buying it, fine. But it's not. I just, something in me is either unable or unwilling to think that kind of manipulatively. You know, it's hard enough to try to learn how to express yourself genuinely, let alone to try to anticipate any, you know, kind of commercial response. I mean, and I take my hat off to the people who can do it and do it well. I mean, but it is propaganda. It is, I mean, the Academy Awards themselves were started as a kind of whitewash for the moral failings that Hollywood was going through in the 20s. It's actually when they had that, have you ever heard of the production code, the Hays Code, that they tried to put on themselves in the 20s because of all the kind of moral, the Catholic League and different legions of decency and so on were complaining that not just the movies themselves, but things like
yes.
Yeah.
The actor Fatty Arbuckle had killed somebody, and a director had been murdered. It was like all this seedy stuff was actually happening. So they thought, why don't we do something to sort of put a beautiful sheen, a kind of air of seriousness on our industry, which is basically a cesspool of commercialization. And they came up with the Academy Awards. In fact, there's this great article in The Atlantic this month by Noah Gittell who details all of this stuff. And, there's a famous quote from the film historian David Thompson who said that the industry wanted the public to think, look, it's an academy, they must be respectable. And it just becomes this, promotion scheme. And
so, I actually, that's interesting because I'm thinking about this and I mean, I think it's hard not to agree with you, right? So you could either say, I agree with you and I enjoy it anyways, like I agree with any number of criticisms of the Super Bowl, but I mean, if it's a good game, I enjoy it. This last Super Bowl was not a good game. Right. But there's no question that it serves this PR purpose. But what I'm kind of wondering about is the actual. One of the things that's interesting is we talk about brands and advertising. We kind of mock that. One of the things that's fascinating is that some work that goes into commercial brand advertising is so much more effective and so much better done than many, many movies and television shows. And I guess also the award show itself. That's kind of what's blown my mind trying to watch the Oscars recently. There hasn't been an Oscars that I've been able to sit through since I actually honestly can't remember when. So it's interesting that you're talking about there's all these games going on and it's propaganda and it's self-congratulation and it's branding. Supposedly by some of the people who are best at earth at doing this stuff, and it's just not very good. It's boring.
Yeah. Well, I think they've discovered over the years, if you look back at what some of the greatest motion pictures or, Oscar winners in the past were, you'll find some actually good movies.
Oh, I mean the actual show itself, actually. The
show itself?
Oscars.
Wow.
The Oscars. Like, we'll get to the movies, but the Oscars are terrible.
It's the world's most boring television show. It really is. Ever since Oprah, Uma, I mean, they're trying too hard to make it a kind of a stand-up show. Jon Stewart bombed. I thought he was actually kind of funny.
Right.
But, honestly, I'm not watching it that closely. Who is it this year? It's, what's her name?
I don't know.
It's the dancing lesbian. Oh, God, why am I blanking on her name? She's funny. She's a talk show
Ellen
host.
DeGeneres.
Oh, Ellen DeGeneres.
Yeah,
Sure, she's funny enough. But,
okay, but so what? To me, it's like... they already have the Clios, they already have the.
Do you see right there though? Do you see right there though, Matthew, the importance in building your own brand? You couldn't think of her name, but you sure knew.
Yeah, but I did remember Dancing Lesbian. Yeah, good for her.
The Dancing Lesbian. That's a powerful brand.
Yeah.
No, but that is just kind of fascinating. That there is this thing of there's the conversation about the spectacle and what purpose it really serves, and then there's just the man, that's just bad. In the same way I can watch a car commercial.
Honestly, Michael, I think it demonstrates how out of touch that kind of, talk about the 1%. This is definitely an audience filled with 1%ers giving 1% rewards to other 1%ers. And, some of them are nouveau 1%ers, so I totally understand the value of wanting to be lifted up into that special group. I'm not immune to the sort of attraction of watching that happen. But it's so insular that they assume that whatever they're going to be interested in, who wins, who's better than who's nominated, that the rest of us will be. And to some extent we are, but it basically results in a boring it's prefab kind of television show.
All right, so
I'd rather actually. I think at the same time will be the new episode of Walking Dead. I'll probably be watching that.
Oh man, let's just wait 5 minutes before you guys go off completely on that.
Now we're talking.
I'm not gonna go
now
off.
we're talking.
My Lord. Oh my Lord.
That's just a symbol of how bad I find the Academy Awards.
And how amazing you think The Walking Dead is.
No.
I'll tell you what. I will be on YouTube watching compilations of like the best like moments in like Andre Agassi and Roger Federer's careers, right? Like that's what I will be watching at that time.
You'll probably get a deeper emotional reaction from
that. I have no doubt.
I mean, if the movies themselves were movies that I was more inspired by, I might actually even be more into it. But these days, they've stopped having to try to make these movies like really.
Yeah, 12
really
years a slave, 12 years a slave. Who cares about that
but
one?
actually, I was interested in that, Matthew, because like these are, whether we like it or not, like the Best Picture nominees, at least theoretically, these are representing something that's in the zeitgeist, whether it's in culture, politics.
That's why I sort of disagree with you here on this one, Matthew.
No,
but I want to hear it, Matt.
I have to take exception to that because they're not just from the zeitgeist. They're carefully planned, marketed products.
And they're
not just emanations of a spontaneous culture.
Right. But I guess not to go totally down this track, but in some respects, I don't know what is a totally spontaneous emanation of a spontaneous culture. But I am.
Whatever it is, it's certainly not a Hollywood blockbuster.
It's certainly not a Hollywood blockbuster. But I am curious. Your more critical eye, and we don't need to run through the list, but like, is there any of these movies that you take any like encouragement from? Like sometimes something does.
There's one. Yeah, I've only seen 4. I've only seen 4 out of all the Best Picture nominations, which, by the way, they've expanded just so more films get that. Bump
what's the deal with that? Everything's nominated.
It just goes to show you it's just about raising their box office. There's a direct correlation between being in the Oscars and selling more tickets. That's
not
all
everything.
It is.
Fruitvale Station wasn't nominated, and I totally thought it should have been.
I wanted to see that, and I haven't, and maybe that will be on my list, but I can't speak to that. But, yeah, there's actually the one movie on that list that I saw and enjoyed unequivocally, although I wouldn't put it down in the canon of the greats of all time, but it was very good, was Philomena. And to me, that was, it's Stephen Frears, who's kind of, he's not an auteur, but he is one of the more intelligent directors who's worked through Hollywood. He's not an American, but he's done movies like, what's it called, My Beautiful Laundrette and The Van, and what else have you guys probably seen? I think he did High Fidelity, but not your super arty movies, but genuine kind of expressions, Dangerous Liaisons. But to me, if he and people also like David O. Russell, whose film I didn't see, but I've seen all his other ones.
I enjoyed American Hustle.
But these guys, to me, are at least a cut above, like, say, a Spielberg or, like a huge blockbuster that to me is even more maudlin. But Philomena I can recommend. It has some shades of gray in it. Some people have called it a anti-Catholic movie, but I think it also kind of confirms the main character's faith in a way, and it moves Steve Coogan's jaded character sort of a little bit into her zone. So that movie to me is good, but it's again, it's like it's such a low bar for what these movies are. Because even to me, I didn't see 12 Years a Slave. I probably will just because of how much hype it's getting. But to me, it's so easy to see the formula for an Oscar movie. I mean, right? You have somebody who's either like not full retard, but you know what I'm saying. It's like someone's disabled or someone's dying of AIDS. You have an AIDS guy in what's it called? Dallas Buyers Club. You got the disease one. You got someone who's oppressed or, hunted, and you some victim of some social injustice. So you have that in 12 Years a Slave. And maybe it's depicted great, but to me these movies are not challenging. They're just reprocessing your kind of pre-existing prejudices and letting you congratulate yourself on how sensitive you are because, yes, slavery was terrible. It was awful.
Well, apparently there were guys like Richard Cohen who actually did need to know that. But
sure, okay,
yeah.
That's fine. So you'll sweep them up. If that movie's going to change their mind, I'd be really surprised. But to me, that's not art. That's not asking the deep questions. That's just kind of, titillating us and kind of flattering us, and to get you to buy the ticket. And again, I do respect the level of craftsmanship that it takes to make these movies. I'm in awe of some of these people, especially like Gravity, which is a movie that I really disliked for everything except for the technical aspects of it. But
Kurian is a great director as a director.
His other movies I preferred. Children of Men, as a sci-fi fan, I thought was a great kind of what-if concept. But to me, Gravity was so tone-deaf. Anytime anybody opened their mouth, anytime some characterization tried to come into it, that I just was so taken out of it. I know we've talked about that before on the show, but it's not... Like, again, I'm so disappointed at how most of the movie is just that reptilian brainstem, like, oh, my God. It's not contemplative in any way. It's not challenging in any way. Everything's very spoon-fed, and it's just a roller coaster. It's
isn't that
something that deserves an award?
So
apart from the effects.
So is it? Well, I do want to allow. We'll kind of move to Walking Dead and TV in a second. But my last question is
not necessary, but okay.
Not necessary. Well, we'll move. We'll go to we'll broaden the realm of the conversation here. But I was wondering if, because I'm sure that some people are because I guess leaving Gravity's side, but I'm sure some people are kind of taken aback by the sort of characterization of like, oh, okay, we know how to win an award, and by doing a movie with a victim of AIDS or a victim of a historic crime like slavery or the Holocaust.
Right.
Actually, Kate Winslet in Extras, which was a pretty good Ricky Gervais show. She had a great cameo where she came in. She was like, and she's in a nun's outfit, and she's like, I finally know how I'm going to win my Academy Award. I'm doing a Holocaust movie. And then she says, like, I think it's after one. Like, she goes, they literally shit Oscars. So that's what I'm doing. And I'm finally going to get my. So I get that point. Do you think building off of that, and I think actually, was it Samuel Jackson who said this? I think Samuel L. Jackson said something. And it would be really ironic if I was confusing Samuel L. Jackson with another African-American actor after that incident.
Lawrence Fishburne,
Maybe. So maybe Lawrence Fishburne actually said this. But I'm pretty sure it was Samuel L. Jackson.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. But hey, if this is how I get to have an altercation with Samuel L. Jackson and go viral, so be it. But whoever made this point, it was a smart point.
Spit it out already.
I thought it was an interesting point. Hey, relax there, buddy. Walking Dead is not canceled. But the point was he was saying, look, obviously, slavery movies, and by all accounts, I actually haven't seen 12 Years a Slave either, but all accounts, it's an important step because it depicts this institution much more viscerally and brutal and horrifically than maybe previous depictions had. But he said, look, at a certain point, we need to stop being like, where is the Fruitville Station, as an example? Where are the movies about structural, racial, and economic inequities right now that have like more direct implications? So I think kind of spinning out of what you're saying, do you also see in these self-congratulatory movies that do deal with important issues, but there's also a potential like evasion of the present?
Oh, absolutely, because it's that sort of double-edged sword by, like a little knowledge is a dangerous thing in a way. It's like you think that you've described some problem, but since you've just marketed it and packaged it and sold it back to people, you've kind of replaced any real insight into it with the feeling that you've had insight into it. And I think that does damage. And I'm not even just talking political, because I'm not the kind of person that wants a political message in my movies. In fact, sometimes that can be detrimental if it's too heavy-handed. But just on an imaginative, emotional ability to identify with other people or other values or other ways of knowing things kind of level, that can be stunting. And I think we've seen that. I think that is the result of the Schindler's Lists and the even Captain Phillips and, which I also saw. But these kind of movies that make you think like, oh, wow, yeah, we're really getting to see what it's like to go through this. And it's not authentic and it's not real. So, it reminds me of, I forget what the conversation you guys were having some weeks ago, but it's like the only thing worse than not being exploited, the only thing worse than being exploited is not being exploited by the capitalist system. So in a way, it's good that you're making movies with these topics in some sense, but it's actually not really doing the thing that I think that quote or that sentiment you expressed is calling for.
Yeah.
So this was a really, really fascinating discussion about the Oscars and everything. So to wrap this up, I would just like to
brains.
What?
No, I would just
what about brains?
1 second though. We gotta get serious here for a moment. We're having a good conversation here. So to wrap this up, who do you think's taking Best Picture?
Oh, well, I think it's definitely gonna be 12 Years a Slave.
12 Years a Slave. That's
Hello?
your pick.
No, I don't care. I was just playing along.
What are your odds on? What are your odds on Best Director?
Well, I really think it's David O. Russell's year. No, I have no idea.
I would love to.
I'm going to be putting some money down on the online bets for the Oscars.
I did want to also briefly hear about, you said that you liked Wolf of Wall Street, and I found that a very disturbing movie to the extent that I enjoyed parts of it and were turned off by parts of it. So if you,
I'll give you my really quick take on Wolf of Wall Street.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good movie.
Okay, so we'll give our really quick takes on Wolf of Wall Street.
I hated him, but I don't think other people came across. I don't think they did a good job of doing that in the movie. I think a lot of people left that movie thinking.
I don't think they were making a movie to make you hate him. I think they were making a movie to make you.
But because I have these feelings about these types of people already going into it, I disliked him tremendously throughout.
Here's what I thought of the movie. So the reason I say I liked it was I didn't. It was. I think the thing that people don't necessarily get about Scorsese is that he like Goodfellas is a very funny movie. It's incredibly violent and disturbing, but it's really funny, and it describes. There's something it gets at even beyond the mafia stuff, and so I went into this movie like. I didn't expect Jonah Hill to be hilarious, and like the way he tries to dress like a wasp, like that was funny. So I found it like enjoyable to watch. Now my criticisms of it, I think Scorsese has like these obsessions with certain things, which to me, like I'm psychoanalyzing, but it's sort of like, hey, he grew up in a tough neighborhood in New York. And he was kind of like a nice artistic kid, and maybe he wasn't at the center of all of this debauchery, so he's fascinated by it, and that drives so much of his outlook and his filmmaking. And it's like, dude, you're 70, you've won Academy Award, like you need to kind of broaden your scope a little bit, which ironically he does in his movies like Kundun, which are like totally different, which I also think was a terrific movie. But I think that's a problem. And then I think my third point, and this is just ambiguous, is I think that it's going to be like the Wall Street phenomenon, the Stone movie, where it's like, look, the intention of that movie, and I think in Stone's case it's way more of a strong intention, but the intention is like, this is disgusting. This is a total moral failing. But if you're watching it and you'll go away because Gecko is the most charismatic character. And in this movie, if your outlook is how can I get a Maserati and parties with prostitutes as quickly as possible, you're going to think this is amazing. But if you have any type of broader perspective, you'll think this is actually pretty morally disgusting what they're doing. And then even the debauchery just sort of gets redundant and depressing at a certain point. So those are my kind of takeaways from it. I was just surprised at how much I enjoyed it.
That makes sense. I feel like Scorsese did have a cocaine problem in his late 20s, early 30s. Like he went down that sort of party rabbit hole, from what I understand. So part of me felt like this was a movie that was sort of wistful in a way, like, oh God. And I understand the desire for parties and debauchery. Like, I'm not immune to that, and I think that is something that any movie is certainly within its sort of scope to want to discuss. I certainly don't expect the movie to be some moralizing finger pointing, but to me this just felt like sort of unabashed, so much time of like celebratory that when it tried to make those few little hints towards like, oh wow, maybe this is bad, it was so anemic that it felt sort of out of place. Like he doesn't really suffer anything other than having to kind of stop what he's doing. And while I could also enjoy it on a sort of Wile E. Coyote kind of comedy level, which I definitely did in plenty of parts, as a whole, I was waiting for that kind of Taxi Driver moment, which is like my favorite movie of his still, where you kind of are like, yeah, he's a badass. This is I'm with this weird loner, and then like when he murders all these people, you're like, oh, whoa, what was I doing? Like, I was identifying with this guy.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really come. There's that one scene at the end with his wife that sort of faints at it. But, you know, for a 3-hour movie, unless you're enjoying sort of every frame, and again, all the filmmaking, the amazing bravura Scorsese sort of style is there to entertain you. It's, you know what I'm saying? Unless
I agree. You know, the last thing I would say about it, though, is at the end of it, and tell me what, I want to know, as we wrap this, you know, this part of the conversation up, what you both think of this. But I think part of the reason that the fact that he didn't suffer punishment didn't bother me as much was because it was like that, in a way, to me, was the most reflective part of the film. It was like Wall Street did destroy the global economy, and these guys are not bothered by what they did, and they haven't paid consequences. And if anything, he's just a little small shyster. Most of these guys are actually on cable, you know, like whining about, frankly, people like us criticizing them. So I was like okay with that in some sense, because it was like, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, no, I understand that too. And in fact, that is the ending of Taxi Driver, where you think, oh my God, he's murdered all these people and he must go to jail. And then it says hero saves girl. And it's like he's feted by society for this outburst of violence. And to me, that's the same exact point in a way. But since since you've been watching him for 3 hours, and I think it really does cross that line into like, wow, yeah, this is fun to be a a Wall Street executive with all this money, and I think that's an important thing to recognize. Like, I don't think we can solve any of our societal issues with that kind of worship of power by denying or repressing that actual feeling within all of us that, like, yeah, shit, I would do that.
Yes.
But to me, it was muddled. You know, it was not fully one thing or the other, and I don't know if he finally knew what he wanted to say, but I don't know. I have a big bag of mixed feelings for it.
I got you. I hear that. Ambiguity is a very fair response to that movie.
Yeah. So anyhow, you know, instead of watching the Academy Awards, I suggest everybody go to Fandor.com, which is a great website that streams classic and independent and foreign movies, and you can get a 2 free week membership there. Not that I'm being paid to sponsor them or anything, but I think that's a much better use of your time. You can look up the totality of cinema history there practically. In fact, some of the most little known but you know, sort of people who I would promote on this show, people like Mark Rappaport, who made films in the 70s. Some of their really weird, really out there, but really amazing movies are available for streaming on there. I suggest you go and check that out rather than consume the latest popcorn movie.
Or even better, you could head to WWE.com, and for $9.99 a month now, you can sign up for their brand new WWE Network, 24/7 pro wrestling all the time.
Yeah.
How about that?
Oh, come on, Matthew. That's a real bread and circus. You've been calling out all this phoniness. That's real spectacle.
Yeah, that is bread and circus. Look, I saw Hulk Hogan take on Big John Studd at the Richfield Coliseum in like 1985. So I've been there. I had my moment with the wrestling thing. I won't deny everybody their pleasure. But
I just felt this moment of spiritual connection between the Matts, between the Matthew and the Matt.
I didn't continue it into my adulthood, but hey, that's
wow, it's getting critical.
You think you're special now, don't you?
Not really. That's why I have to talk this way. But anyway, have you guys ever seen, have I ever discussed a movie on here called Mikey and Nicky? I probably haven't because it's not streaming, but if you guys have the ability to get DVDs, I want to recommend it to you.
Okay, Mikey and Nicky, and then the other thing was Fandor, like...
Fandor, Fandor. That's a website that's just a treasure trove of movies.
Okay, and only one O, just to be sure.
Yeah, only one.
Okay, great. O. Yeah, I will check that out because I can guarantee you I will not be watching either The Walking Dead or the Oscars. So I actually do need to find something to do besides Federer clips and Agassi clips and Nadal clips and probably some maybe just Nadal too. But actually, between those three, I might be actually all set. But if not, I will check out Fandor.com.
Okay, and last but not least, I just want to mention that there's two movies that I saw this year that I actually thought were the best movies I saw this year, and one is finally coming out, another one is still unreleased. But the one that is coming out is called It Felt Like Love, which, full disclosure, was produced by a friend of mine, but it's actually a really great movie about sort of a 12-year-old girl's sort of sexual awakening. I know, cue the joke. But it's actually really tastefully done, and she lives in Brooklyn. It features a lot of recent young rappers from Brooklyn, which that'll appeal to you, Michael, so you can tell people that's why you're watching it. But
that
it's
actually really would be why I'm watching it. But sorry, go ahead.
Sure, no, I know.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
And the other movie is actually, I hope it comes out this year. It's called Hellaware, and it is about a hipster photographer who kind of gloms onto this insane clown posse wannabe group to do his art photography of, and it just kind of goes nuts. It's a comedy about sort of artistic pretension and the art world and how things go the way they do. And it was played at the at BAM's Cinema Fest last summer, but hopefully that comes out.
That sounds like a script that you and Binder could have written together. Actually,
maybe that's why I loved it. But yeah I felt like one's for you and one's for Matt. So look for those guys.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thank you so much as always, film guy Matthew Weiss. I love all of our film people, but I really like. Because Sam's not here, we can have a moment of sort of emotional genuineness. I like the perspective a lot, and I always learn a ton.
You should hear the things Michael says about Isabel Gillies in this office.
Like, she's very charming. She's very nice. Oh, I'll check that movie out. Yeah, I'd say, get out of here. All right, thanks, man.
I do think all the reviewers bring something different to it, just for the record. And but I appreciate your sentiments, Michael.
If that's true, Matt, wait, before you go, Matthew, if that is true, can you please explain to me what Chris Rosen brings to the table?
Oh, well, he's a cautionary tale, clearly. He lets you see what happens when you're subsumed by the entertainment industrial complex and become a mouthpiece for the latest press release. And Sam does a great job of calling that out, and he's a good sport about it. He has no qualms about what he does, which makes him a perfect foil for Sam. And it's very entertaining, I find. I think it's great to hear.
I'm actually at Movie Phone now. That's my that's my name.
Yeah,
Chris yeah.
I mean, he's a promotions guy, so it's a different side of the coin, and I think it's funny to hear Sam poke fun at him.
The yin to the yang. Thank you, Matthew Weiss, film guy Matthew Weiss. Thanks, man.
Thank you, guys.